Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new video. Now I've got some massive news that could change the lives of millions of Americans. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders' new bill that just passed in Congress. And it's not just a small change, it's a game changer. You've probably seen headlines floating around about how this bill will provide $5,200 a month in Social Security benefits for all SSI, Supplemental Security Income, SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and VA, Veterans Affairs, beneficiaries, and trust me, this is one of the most significant pieces of legislation in decades. We're going to break down everything you need to know how this bill works, who benefits, why it matters, and what it means for the future of Social Security in the U.S. So grab some popcorn, because this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Alright, before we dive into the specifics of Bernie Sanders' bill, let's take a quick step back and talk about what's currently going on with Social Security benefits. For millions of people across the country, whether they're elderly, disabled, or veterans, Social Security is their lifeline. It's what helps them cover the basic necessities: food, rent, utilities, medical bills. But here's the issue: the current benefits, especially for people on SSI and SSDI, are simply not enough. A single individual on SSI right now typically receives about $794 a month. If you're on SSDI, the average benefit is around $1,200 to $15 per month, depending on your earnings history. And for veterans, the average disability compensation is between $1,000 and $3,500, depending on the severity of the injury or illness. Now, let's be real, how far do those numbers actually go? In most parts of the country, that's barely enough to cover rent, let alone other necessities like food, transportation, or medical care. This is especially problematic considering that costs are rising for just about everything. From healthcare expenses to rising housing costs and inflation, the gap between what people are earning and what they need is getting wider and wider. And if you're living on a fixed income, this is a huge issue. That's where Bernie Sanders' bill comes in. Now, we've all heard Sanders talk about the need for reform in Social Security for years. But this new bill is the most ambitious attempt to overhaul the system we've seen in a long time. The Social Security Expansion Act was passed in Congress with broad support, and it's a major win for progressive policy advocates who've been pushing for higher benefits for Social Security recipients for decades. What's the bottom line? The bill will raise monthly payments to $5,200 for everyone who qualifies for SSI, SSDI, or VA benefits. That's a huge step up, especially when you consider the current average benefits. If you're used to receiving less than $1,500 a month, suddenly getting $5,200 a month will absolutely change the game for you. It means that people won't have to choose between putting food on the table and paying their rent. It means that veterans, many of whom have been struggling with injuries or disabilities after serving our country, will now be able to live with more dignity and financial security. Okay, now, I know you're probably thinking, this sounds great, but how can the government afford to pay everyone this much? And that's a great question. This is a common concern when we talk about expanding Social Security benefits. It's a huge increase. So how does the system pay for it? Well, the good news is that the bill actually has a revenue-neutral approach. That means it doesn't add significantly to the federal deficit. How does it work? The government plans to fund this massive increase by increasing taxes on the wealthiest Americans and closing tax loopholes for corporations. For example, the bill introduces a new tax structure that targets individuals making over $400,000 per year. Under this structure, the wealthiest Americans will pay more into Social Security, which ensures that the funds are there to support the increased benefits for lower-income recipients. Essentially, it's about making the rich pay their fair share and ensuring that the program is properly funded without cutting into other essential services. But the financial part doesn't stop there. The bill also proposes closing tax loopholes that allow large corporations to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. This might sound like a small detail, but it's actually one of the key pieces of the plan. By ensuring that corporations pay a fair tax rate, the government can reallocate those funds to the Social Security system to cover the increased benefits. And last but not least, the bill calls for expanding the Social Security Trust Fund, which is essentially the savings account for Social Security payments. By boosting the trust fund, it guarantees that the system has enough resources to keep up with higher monthly payouts over the long run. Now let's zoom in on who benefits from this bill. While the numbers are staggering, $5,200 a month sounds like a lot. It's important to understand the breadth of the impact this bill will have. We're talking about millions of people here. In the U.S., there are about 8 million people receiving SSI benefits, another 9 million on SSDI, and approximately 4 million veterans who qualify for disability compensation through the VA. That's a massive pool of people who are going to see their monthly checks increase by a life-changing amount. But let's not forget, these are people who have been struggling for years. SSI and SSDI recipients, for example, are often some of the most vulnerable people in society, many of whom are living with chronic illness, physical disabilities, or severe mental health conditions. They can't work, and they rely on these benefits to survive. Giving them an increase to $5,200 per month means greater financial independence, better access to healthcare, and a higher standard of living overall. For veterans, many of whom face disabilities related to their service, this increase will help them get the care they need, whether it's medical care, housing assistance, or just daily living expenses. It will make it easier for them to transition back into civilian life and feel supported by their government after sacrificing for their country. So, what does this bill really mean in the broader context? First and foremost, it's a huge victory for progressive policy, but it also sends a clear message to the American people. It's a signal that we're starting to move towards a fairer, more equitable system, where those who need help the most get the resources they deserve. The argument that we can't afford to expand Social Security is becoming harder to justify, especially when you consider the huge wealth gap in America. The richest Americans have seen their wealth grow exponentially, while the most vulnerable have been left behind. The Social Security Expansion Act is a way of saying, enough is enough. It's time to put the needs of the many ahead of the few. And in a world where the cost of living is rising and people are being pushed further into poverty, this bill is one of the few things that could actually help bridge the divide between the wealthy and everyone else. Of course, like with any piece of major legislation, there are critics. Some argue that this bill could lead to economic instability, or they worry about the long-term sustainability of expanding Social Security benefits. Others worry about the potential for inflation or a higher national debt. But what Sanders and his supporters argue is that the current system isn't sustainable either, and without taking bold action now, we risk leaving millions of people in a perpetual state of financial insecurity. In reality, the U.S. economy can afford to invest in the people who need it most. And while no plan is perfect, this bill offers a clear path forward, a path that makes sure people aren't left behind just because they're too old, disabled, or have served in the military. It's about protecting the most vulnerable, not letting them fall through the cracks. And ultimately, that's what this bill represents, a commitment to fairness and justice for all. So, what do you think? Are you excited about the Social Security Expansion Act, or do you have concerns about how it will affect the economy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. And of course, make sure you subscribe so you can stay updated on all the latest news, policies, and updates that matter to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.